Hey everyone, Temporal here, and today we are answering the question, what DPS are worth learning right now? And to some of you that might seem like a silly question. Oh, you can go learn whatever you want. You can one-trick any hero to GM, and that's absolutely true. You can one-trick any hero to GM. Every hero's been one-tricked to GM. That is perfectly doable. But there's a couple factors that help. One is that it is actually helpful to learn heroes while they're meta. You're going to get more good situations for them, more situations that are reflective of sort of their optimal use, as well as more situations that are reflective of people will know how to play around them, how to play into them. You're also going to get to, win a little more potentially, which can help. Obviously, ultimately the win rates will even out there. That's how the MMR works. But it's going to feel better to learn a hero while it's meta. You're going to have less people angry at you on the ladder if you learn a hero while it's meta, but it's also just really easier to go like, hey, I'm getting lots of good practice. I'm getting lots of, hey, 80% of my matches when I pick this hero, if I were to do this in organized play, for example, will look like this. And 20 will look like this, where I'm trying to force something, we made the wrong pick, whatever. And you don't really want your ladder experience to be the inverse of this. It'll slow down your learn rate. Now, if there's a hero that you want to go learn, absolutely go learn whatever hero you want. If you're playing an off-meta hero, I am not saying you need to swap over and start playing a meta hero whatsoever. But if you are flexible in what you want to learn, then doing a little bit of research and considering, hey, what should I learn right now, is a pretty good idea. The other thing I would really say on this front, or the other main topic that main point I would say on this front is, as well as, hey, learning stuff while it's meta can be helpful, you do want to build a team. I strongly recommend for most people to build, not a team, to build a roster of playable heroes for themselves that does fill a position on a team. So we are talking about a hit scan player here, and I would recommend that they build themselves a group of heroes. So if they're playing McCree, yeah, they can go over and learn Soldier like they're talking about. They can also learn Ashe. They can also learn Tracer. They can also learn Sim, because yes, that is in a hit scan DPS player's pool. Like, those are things that I would recommend. And the reason that I do that, even if you're like, no, I don't want to play on a team, this applies a little less for console, which this guy is, but this is a video for everyone, so we're going to cover it. If you are playing Overwatch, the most fun way to play Overwatch is in an organized setting. The game was designed to be played in an organized way. Them adding a solo ladder was this is kind of what market forces demand type thing. This game is way, way more fun in organized play, and even if you don't have time now, even if your schedule doesn't allow for it, even if you don't want to work with other people, maybe 6 months from now, maybe a year from now, maybe in Overwatch 2, maybe when you get out of class and are in the summer, whatever the case may be, you might want to join a team, and you'll be so much happier if you've put in the legwork ahead of time to make that possible or to be closer to it, rather than be in a situation where, hey, your McCree is, let's say, diamond level, but your Tracer is gold level, and your Ashe is gold level, and your Symmetra is silver level. Okay, well, probably not going to have a silver Symmetra if you've got a diamond McCree, but you don't want to be in that situation, because it really does create a situation where your team options, you do not, as teams get better, they will not accommodate your one tricks. You will be forced, even if you're a fantastic Tracer, if it's a Widow meta, you're going to have to play Widow. And if you can't play Widow, that's not going to work. They're going to find someone else, or they're going to bench you, or you guys are going to scrim at a lower SR than normal, and that's not going to be particularly fun. So it's either going to create a situation where you can't play on a team that is at the level that you'd like to, and when you do swap to Tracer, you sort of just roll people when it makes sense, and that's not really fun. That causes too much of a disparity for you. I know, rolling people is fun, but really not so much in that scrim environment to just roll things. You'll be surprised at how quickly you get bored of just going 6-0, 7-0, 8-0 in scrims. So that would be a thing that you would want to consider. Or, you can join a weaker team, and, they'll potentially accommodate your one trickiness, your two trickiness, you're not being able to play Ashe, or you're not being able to play Tracer, whatever. But that's going to, again, put you in a situation where it's not that good a team because they're accommodating the one trickiness. They're not adjusting to the meta or counter meta or, doing a top cut counter meta type thing there. So those would be the two main things I'd consider when figuring out, hey, what hero should I work on? What hero should I learn? And I can go over roughly what the hero rosters are for every position. Obviously, there's a little bit of it moving around. It ultimately always will adjust based on, hey, if we enter a meta where it's Tracer Sombra is the hero pool, well, then you might have your hit scan playing Tracer and your flex support playing Sombra. But if you were in a Sombra Genji meta, it might be, hey, your hit scan is playing Sombra and your flex support is playing Tracer. Or if you're in a Tracer Ashe meta, well, one of your flex DPS, excuse me, I said support earlier, one of your flex DPS is also playing a hit scan there. So these pools are never perfect, and I'd say DPS are the most flexible in terms of what they have. The hero pool concept applies the least to DPS of any of the positions because they have more back and forth between hit scan and flex DPS or hit scan and projectile than any of the other roles, but it's still there. It's still something you'd want to build towards. So if we look at this one specifically, we would take a look and go, hey, how do we figure out what's meta right now? And let's take a look. Let's head over to damage. And if we head over to damage, we can literally just go like this and say, hey, what kind of meta are we in? And I know without looking that the ladder isn't a poke meta right now. That's just something that I know. I pay a lot of attention to Overwatch. But even if you didn't know that, you could go, hey, what are we going to do? And you might go, oh, okay, well, maybe the top 10 or the top 20 are in a poke meta, but what about the rest of the ladder? The truth is, the rest of the ladder does take cues from the top of the ladder. Yes, it will ultimately play with its own meta. I think this person's in Diamond, so they should very much be taking cues from the top of the ladder. But even if they were in Gold, it would be a thing where, yes, you would see, let's actually move over to Tank. Reinhardt is not meta right now, as you can see. Super is Super. Super is best tank is probably Reinhardt, and Super also is a streamer, or maybe Super is practicing to go, hey, I need to do this for my team. And you will see anomalies like that where you look at something, you only see one or two of it, and you go, is that a case of it's not really being played in the meta right now, but they're practicing it specifically so they can get better for their team? Or are they doing something entertaining on stream or something like that? But you can get the overall sense by looking. Yes, and what I was saying there is we are in a poke meta, and so you might see lower on the ladder down in like Gold, maybe Plat, something like that. You might always see a bit more of a bias towards Reinhardt, a bit more of a bias towards Brawl, but even lower on the ladder from the reviews I'm seeing is heading in a pretty reasonable poke direction right now. So again, quick way, if you don't have someone you can talk to, if you don't have an expert who can just tell you, you can go look at the top 10, top 20 really, and go, hey, what is being played right now? What is ladder meta? And we can pretty quickly see as we look at our ladder meta here that that's a poke hero, that's a poke hero, that's a poke hero. Oh, let's go like this. Poke hero, poke hero, poke hero, poke hero, poke, 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 poke. So this is mostly looking at a poke meta, and then we see the other thing that's slipping in here as the third choice for people tends to be Tracer. Oh, I missed a Hanzo there. Tends to be Tracer, which is fine. Tracer will exist even in poke metas, and you'll see dive heroes in general exist even in poke metas because what's going on, and we could also fill out these Genjis if we want here as this. These would be dive heroes, and these would be used as sort of, if you think of the rock, paper, scissors, the triangle that exists where we have, hey, poke beats brawl, brawl beats dive, dive beats poke. Maybe this isn't fully true. You can absolutely play to beat your counter, but this is sort of a basic thing. And if something's meta, it's generally meta because it's doing a pretty good job of beating its counter. But this is sort of like a basic philosophy that you can think of. And hey, dive, if poke is strong, it's probably strong enough to beat dive if poke really is the meta, really what's going on is ladder always does a pretty weak job of playing dive, but an individual dive hero can still harass poke heroes, can still take positioning from them, take away their map control, force them back to the group, and make them weaker. So if we look at our triangle, hey, if brawl is strong, maybe you learn a brawl hero or a poke hero. If poke is strong, you could learn a poke hero, or your second choice would be to learn a dive hero. That's sort of how you'd look at this. And we see this. This gives us that good input that we wanted. So do we learn these specific heroes? Probably. Probably is the answer to that. If people are having success with them, you could probably go with these. But for this specific question, and we'll answer this for DPS because DPS is what was being asked about and what our video is going to be about here, but I'm happy to answer other questions at the end for other roles. You'd look at this and you'd go, hey, who makes sense? You see these are potentially here. We know our player is a hit scan. Well, for a hit scan, what can we think? I would say, and like you've also got to consider, is it a flash in the pan moment? Do you want to learn a hero that's going to be dumpstered in a month and then never be playable again? Well, probably not. And you'd like to learn something that fulfills your role, and we're looking at a hit scan DPS here, and they've currently got McCree. Now, I don't see much soldier in here. I don't know about you guys, but oh, here's our first soldier in the 18 spot. Second soldier in the 25 spots. So top 500, okay, get a few more in here, and soldier's a little better, you know, not quite at the top of the ladder. People know how to shut him down at the very top, but he's pretty good for getting to GM with, so you could rate him a little higher than this. Soldier is not a terrible hero to learn, but he's not actually the one that I would most strongly recommend, because he'll probably be okay. He's never going to be great in organized play. I say never, and then they'll probably buff him to the point at which, okay, he brute forces his way in, like Hog brute forced his way into the ladder when he had silly levels of pellet damage. But the point that we're looking at here is, okay, who makes sense to learn? They're within a potential hit scan DPS's hero pool. They're good right now, and they're expected to stay pretty good. So maybe not the most OP hero, because maybe that's the most likely one to get nerfed. Or maybe the most OP hero if they've been allowed to be OP forever. I'm looking at you, Tracer. She's not actually the most OP hero, but she is the evergreen DPS. If you're looking for a DPS hero to learn that has almost always been good, has had the most time being good, it's Tracer. Tracer spends a lot of time as a top 3 DPS hero. Even when she's not meta, even when dive isn't meta, she's one of those heroes that will frequently work her way in to fill in the gap. Because modern Overwatch is about hybridizing your comp. It's not about, let's drop 6 poke heroes on the board, let's drop 6 brawl heroes on the board. Modern Brawl, yes, it includes a Mei, a Reinhardt, a Lucio, but it also includes a Cassidy, a BAP. Those are a little bit less about brawling and a little bit more we're mixing in some poke elements. Or if we look at dive, well, dives frequently use Tracer Ball, but it'll frequently work in an Echo, an Ashe, a Sigma, some poke elements there. Or if we look at poke sometimes is going to be, hey, Orisa, Sigma, Zen, BAP, and then Hanzo plus Ashe. That would be a full poke comp, but it's pretty normal to work in a Genji, a Tracer, sometimes a Doomfist. By the way, that's where you notice these are showing up on our top picks here. Those are pretty normal things to happen. Or to mix in a Brig to give you a little more brawl resist, to give you a little more brawl power as dive resistance. So these are normal things that happen. So Tracer, very, very evergreen, almost never the wrong hero to learn. The problem, even now, even with, you know, who knows how little time left in Overwatch 1, Tracer is still probably worth learning because Tracer is so darn flexible and seems to be mostly immune to the nerf hammer. So it's very unlikely to be wasted effort if you put effort into learning Tracer right now. Other heroes who might make sense to learn right now. So Tracer would probably be my #1 choice for hero to learn. It's a lot of work. It'll take a while to get a payoff, but she's very unlikely to get nerfed. She's very likely to continue to stay evergreen. My second choice would probably be Hanzo. Yes, even for potentially a hit scan player, you could say, "Oh no, don't do this." Because in a team you would do this less often, that sort of thing. That's fine. You could absolutely say, "Hey, don't want to learn Hanzo, want to learn Ashe instead." I have no problem with that. Ashe is really not as strong as Hanzo right now. But Hanzo has really been a top 5 DPS, not necessarily by pick rate or win rate if you're going to look at overbuff stats or something, but in actual reality, Hanzo has never not been a top 5 DPS since his rework to Scatter Arrow, since he got his lunge, all those things. And he just got more buffs. Is that potentially going to invoke the ire of the balance team and go, oh, now he's too strong, let's nerf him? Potentially, but he's been safe for a long time. He's definitely not as flexible as Tracer, but on ladder, he's pretty darn flexible, pretty darn safe. Ladder uses less strict comps than organized play does. He's a good hero. Wouldn't really go wrong with that. And like I said, DPS pools are expected to be more flexible than other role pools. So learning someone who may not technically be a hit scan, even though we sometimes call him Hanzo scan, is pretty reasonable as a thing to do here. From here, you'd look and go, okay, if you're building yourself as a hit scan and your pool right now really is Cassidy or Cassidy and Soldier, you probably would go, hey, it makes sense to look and go and pick yourself up a Ashe. Ashe is just, she's the sniper. She's the sniper that most of the time gets used. Widowmaker might be good. Widowmaker is dominant in the right hands on the right maps, but she really is map specific. You've got to put a lot of work into getting really good at her specifically, and then she's something that it's like having a kicker. When you want it, it's really, really valuable, but it's not the most important thing to have most of the time, I would say. So you look at that and go, hey, having a good Widow, fantastic. Ashe is the more flexible pick, will fit into more things. That's probably where I would look right now to fit into this poke meta if you don't want to go the Hanzo route and you want to go, no, I want to keep it more narrowly hit scan right now. And then the aim type, obviously it'll be different sensitivity because scope sense is going to be a bit different, but hey, it's still flick aim like Cassidy had. That's something that hopefully will feel good, will make sense, will be a natural way to expand the hero pool there. She's going to rely a little bit more on her mobility. She's going to be able to go vertical with her coach gun, more so than Cassidy. Cassidy can, of course, do aerial rolls now, which is a little silly, but she would be a good one to add here. And then I know we're getting into another one that definitely isn't a hit scan pick, but because your hero pool has basically been one-tricking, and because I'm making this a more general DPS video, I would actually look at Echo. And if you weren't set on being a hit scan, I would move Echo above Ashe here. And the reason for that is I think Echo is flying under the radar. I think Echo is more powerful than most people realize. Yes, I'm saying that when we see a bunch of Echoes in the top 10 here. I think Echo is one of those heroes like Tracer that people are just going to keep getting better and better at and are later going to go, oh my goodness, how was the hero originally in the game in this state? She's still got a lot of room. She is challenging because you have to have 3 different aim styles and the brain is really bad at handling 3 different aim styles at once. It's bad at handling 2 different aim styles at once. And that is she has hit scan in her focusing beam. She has a fast projectile in her left click, and she has a very fast projectile in her stickies, and that is hard for the brain to swap between balance handle for most people, but if you can get good at that, she is very good, and I don't think she's going to go anywhere in terms of the nerf bat, because I don't think people are going to pick up on how much power she really has under the hood there, because most people aren't tapping into it. There's a couple specific players that are, but because the vast majority really haven't, I think you could see that as a good one to go to here. And then anything here that's not on the list, yeah, you've got to learn Sim, and Sim, unfortunately, is one of those things where Sim is useful for organized play. She gives brawl teams a lot of flexibility. She is the absolute queen of a couple specific control points, Lijiang Tower especially, and because she's going to be really useful in those situations, but those situations don't always come up. It's hard to force learning her. So when her maps come up, get some practice on her. That would be what I would recommend there. And that's really what I'd look to right now. I mean, you could certainly say, hey, is there any other factors that could get in here? Anything else? Maybe we should learn specifically for Overwatch 2. For Overwatch 2 specifically, you could be going, hey, Sombra. They've told us that they know they overtuned Sombra, and they've already tuned her down since the playtests. But If I had to guess more or less likely that they nerfed her too much or too little, I would guess that they nerfed her too little, and she's still going to be a good hero. And what we've generally seen in Overwatch is heroes that have been reworked, when they get reworked, tend to get brought up to the new power standard of newly released heroes. So I suspect what you're going to see is if Sombra got a rework, if Bastion got a rework, I'd be less willing to invest in Bastion. But a hero like Sombra, who, yes, will play a bit differently, but some of those things could transfer. She'd probably be the best place to invest, specifically if you're going, no, I want to be sort of on the ground running for Overwatch 2. That said, you can really never go wrong with Tracer. You really can't. I'm serious. And Sombra is challenging to learn on the ladder. You'll do it. You'll learn Sombra on the ladder because that's where you learn things. That's where you work on things. Even if you're playing an organized play, that's where you learn your heroes. But how do I put this? She's not going to feel great. You're not going to be doing, oh yes, I'm aggressively super climbing with Sombra. Sombra's can be a bit of pain on the ladder to learn there. You can absolutely climb with her. You can absolutely do it. Totally doable, but she really does feel a more utility type role, her scouting, her setups, or all that stuff. You really do want that good team play that is a little less frequent on ladder. Okay, so that really covers what I thought was important here in terms of what heroes make the most sense to learn right now. And let's pop over to chat and see what people have to say. Okay, so we have here... What is this? A good question being asked on Overwatch University? Impossible? Right? No, it happens from time to time. And they actually did a cool thing on Overwatch University where I think this is cool anyways, because we're on Overwatch University here. They did their quality post thing where they're picking out good posts, and I'm a fan of that. I mean, this isn't really what this video is about, but they're going and trying to cut through the chafe a bit here and pick out some of the better posts here and then stickying them from the previous month there. So that's cool. You guys can go check that out. We saw something by Lucid, something by Egoist Cat, myself, Natter, that's Atrocious Little Castle. That one, they do a lot of guides that are generally funny. Paz is pretty good. Karq did an AMA. Cool stuff like that. But anyway, let's catch up on chat here. James says, I tried Doomfist for the first time properly when his big nerfs got announced for PTR, and I just found myself thinking, why didn't I do this before? Yeah. Easiest to learn heroes while they're powerful, but you do want to be a little careful of, oops, am I learning a hero that's about to get nerf hammered? Mento says, I've tried things about every hero. My tanks have been far better than my other roles, but other roles are at least mid-plat level for almost every hero. Okay. Saving for a PC to get to play and organize games in a team. Nice. It's a lot of fun. Malky says, Temporal, my friend said you are the St. Thomas Aquinas of Overwatch. Incredibly methodical, systematic, insightful, nuanced, and balanced. That's quite a compliment. I agree. Thank you, Malky. Thank you. I appreciate that. Do it to play Ashe. Sparkle and Tracer are little season. Right. Yeah, I remember working with Sparkle back when, but that was, Goats, Zarya, etc. We actually had a fun little story there. We combined teams. I was working with an EU Open Division team. He was on a different EU Open Division team. And we both got to the point where we had the same record. We'd both, I think, lost one match. We'd both lost one match, and it was too early. We were both like 5-1 or something, and it was like, it's too early to have a loss. By the way, for those that don't know, Open Division back then was effectively 10 rounds of Swiss, but it's broken Swiss, where you play a couple rounds, you play 2 rounds and then reseed, and 2 rounds and then reseed, so it's not as good as a true 10-round Swiss, because in the second round you could be playing against someone who's 1-1, or in the second round you could be playing against someone who's 0-1 when you're 1-0. That's not as good for stratifying people. Anyway, I think both of our teams were like 5-1 or something, and that's too early to take a loss. You can still make it. You can be 9-1 and get in. You can even be 8-2 and get into the playoffs, but both of us, our teams decided that's too weak. We don't like it. Something's going to go wrong. So we took the 3 best players from the team I was working with and the 3 best players from a different team, which included him. And there you go. But hey. Oh no, wrong Sparkle there. Wrong Sparkle. Sorry, wrong. I'm looking at the wrong one. I was thinking Sparker. Sorry, brain fart. You guys got a nice EU story there. I'm looking at the wrong person. But hey. Okay. Okay, let's take a look here. I was talking about the, what do you call it? Okay. In gold, the meta is we need Reinhardt always and forever. I mean, yes, but the truth is, even what was I saying? Even the mid ranks, the golds, the plats, the silvers are recognizing they're not like fully recognizing it. They're still cries for Reinhardts, but you're seeing the tanks themselves are playing more poke tanks right now. I see that in the reviews that I do. And so there is some adjustment, even if it's not as extreme, and it'll never be as extreme as the top of the ladder. The top of the ladder will go harder towards the meta or even towards the professional meta. They just don't really have one to look at right now, so they have to look at, well, what's tier 3 and collegiate and, weekend tournaments doing. And then the middle of the ladder, the bottom of the ladder will always have a little bit of a suction towards Brawl and Reinhardt comps. The truth is the ladder in general has a little bit of a suction draw towards Brawl comps because they sort of want the game. There's the most bias in the player base, I'd say, to want the game to work that way. It's not how it works, but hey. Okay, Rein Shielder we throw. Okay, Mentos has been learning Echo Tracer Genji just because Genji is fun, but yeah, Tracer is always good. Right, Tracer is always good. Okay. Hanzo is good for Cassidy players to learn too. Learn to take high ground faster, play positions somewhat similar to Cassidy, and shouldn't be too hard to translate. I mean, it's similar in the sense that Zen and Bap are similar, right? Zen and Ana share similar positioning, at least in their default positioning. Ana rotates into aggressive positioning a little differently than Zen does, though they both have ways that they do it. But Zen and Ana have similar positioning, whereas Ana and Bap, their positioning differs a bit because Bap gets a little bit more obsessed. He has to get a little bit more obsessed about that high ground, which causes him to do a little less lateral movement. And Cassidy versus Hanzo is very similar in that, where they sort of might start similar, but they're going to move, we might be seeing Hanzo finds his way up, Cassidy finds his way to the side. And less extreme, Hanzo will generally be more responsible for getting a secondary angle than Cassidy is in a ladder type situation. Both should try to get secondary angles if the fight allows for it, but I would argue Hanzo has the greater mobility than Cassidy, so there's the greater duty of Hanzo to go get that off angle. Okay. Hanzo is a hero that specializes in doing high damage from long range and short range and also medium range. Yeah, I know. We've got a great video on Hanzo. It's a great video on more buffs that Hanzo needs that is tongue-in-cheek, obviously, but it's on the channel. We did it after the buffs came in, and it is hilarious if I do say so myself. I'm disappointed it didn't get more views because I had a lot of fun with it. Maybe you guys will want to go check it out. In fact, you know what? Let's go ahead and just pull it up because I can do that and I can link in my own chat. Let's just do that. And because I'm talking about it, it seems like something that we should link to in chat right now. There we go. Our Hanzo buff video. It's hilarious. You guys should definitely check it out. Okay. Okay. Yeah, Hanzo does everything. Hanzo really does do everything. For those of you that want to know what beats Hanzo, a coordinated dive does beat Hanzo. Lunge is not that much mobility. If you can surround him and dive him, he will go down. He does not have good anti-dive capabilities. He can maybe get away from a dive. He can, get away from a dive tank getting on him, but if 2 people come after him from different directions, he will get into trouble. But yeah, from a one-on-one perspective, he's incredibly annoying. He's a counter sniper who can one-shot people. He also has tank busting abilities. is you can go, oh, you don't have Storm Arrow, you don't have Lunge, now's the time to go after you with someone like Tracer, and he still gets a headshot, and you're like, I did everything right. Now, maybe you didn't do everything right, maybe you didn't read his crosshair placement and adjust your movements quite accordingly, but that's asking a lot of players. Sombra has always kind of been very good. In organized play, Sombra is pretty darn good, yeah. I mean, originally she found her way into the game as, you know, the original time that she got used would have been really lunatic high, going serious with their Sombra, with the, hey, we're playing around health packs give ult charge. Sombra sometimes will work into a support position, sometimes will work into a DPS position. I loved that version of Sombra. She's been reworked. We've had some EMP metas. We've had some Reaper Sombra stuff. We've had some, obviously, Sombra Goats type things. We've had Sombra to try to answer Goats with Cyber Dive type stuff. And in Dive in general, Sombra has replaced Genji because Sombra is, you know, maybe not quite as good, because Sombra effectively gets to go, hey, this is as good an ult as Nanoblade, probably a better ult than Nanoblade, but it only takes one ult, not two. It also gives our whole team better scouting information to better enable their staging. She's a good hero when you can use that scouting information, when you can play to go, hey, we're not just going to try to be a hack bot, that sort of thing. Yeah. Reseed? How's that work? So what happens is Swiss brackets are something that happens when you have way too many things. So let's say that you have 700 teams in a bracket. Even if you have a feel for what the top teams might be, you're going to go, now, we're not even going to try to seed this. What we're going to do is we're actually going to play rounds of something. So we'll play one round, and we'll just give you random opponents. All these 700 people will get random opponents for the first round in a true Swiss seed. And then the ones that went 1-0, well, now they'll get a random opponent that's 1-0, whereas the people that are 0-1 will get a random opponent that's 0-1. And then for the third round, the ones that are 2-0 will get someone who's 2-0. The ones that are 1-1 will get someone that's 1-1. And you work your way through however many rounds you have, and it's a much, much faster way to determine the rankings effectively, and you're then not done. You then go into a group stage or a playoff stage or something where you go, okay, we're going to take the maybe 2 10-0 teams, and then we're going to take the 7 9-1 teams, and then we're going to fill with the remaining 8-2 teams, and if there's room for a 7-3 team or two, great, we'll take 1 or 2 of them. And then you seed your actual playoffs based off of what came out of that. The problem is, almost all of the Activision Blizzard tournaments, be they open division, be they collegiate, have suffered from, they'll have you play two rounds. They'll schedule 2 opponents for you when you're all 0-0. Or then when you're 2-0, they'll schedule your next 2 opponents. So your first opponent is 2-0, which makes sense, but your second opponent might be 2-1 when you're 3-1. And that doesn't split teams as effectively, so you can have a really easy or a really hard path through. Like if you look at collegiate, because that's a place I've paid a lot of attention, Northwood, SCAD, and Northeastern actually had pretty hard paths through collegiate last semester through their Swiss bracket, whereas a couple other teams like, who did the like Cat Maids or something. It was a pretty respectable college, too, that pretended their mascot was the Cat Maids. I don't remember, but there was 2 teams that looked like they intentionally threw one of the early rounds. They intentionally went 0-1 to start, something like that. So they got easy opponents all the way through, that sort of thing. And that really wouldn't work if you were doing true reseeding all the way through. So they only had 1 reasonably hard match at the end, and 2 of them got into, not playoffs, but group stages like that. And we don't know, shoot, I'm blanking on what they were. I'm blanking on who they were. Oh, well, that's fine. So yeah, but that's how a Swiss tournament works. Think you've seen the Hanzo video? Sombra always an owl. Okay. Kind of like that seating. 700 probably too much. I mean, when you have unlimited people that can sign up, you've got unlimited people that can sign up, and you're sort of at the whims of it. And all you can do is either actually seed every round or add more rounds. And if you add more rounds, well, then you start taking longer for your tournament, right? If you're doing 2 matches in a weekend, so that's 2 matches a week, perhaps, then you go, okay, well, does everyone have to keep their schedule open for if you wanted to do 15 rounds? That's going to add another 3 weeks to your already 5-week thing. So now you're looking at like 7 weeks there, or really 8 once you factor in like playoffs, instead of 4 or 5, and like 8 weeks of, oh, don't miss a match and this and that. That's a long time for you not to have something come up in someone's life that causes you to lose a match. Because remember, most of these people aren't, they're not making owl money. Okay. You never hear played in top 500. Expanding your hero pool is going to be a long-term gain, but there's growing pains. Here's our post, which a couple of you have upvoted already. Thank you very much. I did link that in the description. Hanzo Kree and Sombra are all extremely good at the moment. Or Hanzo Kree and Soldier? No? Hanzo's very good at the moment. Soldier's fine for ladder. Soldier will work well for you for most of ladder. As we saw here, it's not amazing at the very top of the ladder. It starts to fall off, but it will get you into GM and be okay in low GM. So I don't hate it or anything like that. Cassidy is not actually like amazingly strong right now. And I wasn't a fan of the aerial buff for the reasons of the aerial role is stupid, but I'm not going to pretend that before it he was super overpowered. Cassidy has been effectively controlled since the hit scan nerf. You could argue the hit scan nerf hit a little too hard full stop, and I think that's especially true for Ashe. Soldier countered the hit scan nerf by getting his own buff as it came through, and he's held on the best of the mid and long range hit scans, I'd say. But the hit scan nerf probably overall hit just a little bit too hard. But I still think the aerial roll is a stupid change. Okay, anything else here? No, people are saying Tracer, Hanzo, Echo. Sure, those are good ones. Sim in the top 500. Sim's great where she's good. She's good with brawl teams that are going to use her well, but that mostly means organized play or her specific maps. She can be played almost anywhere in organized play to enable brawl teams to give you, hey, we're going to TP onto your backline and then Lucio speed boost and just run it over, and that's how we're going to handle your dive comp or your poke comp or whatever. And that's pretty good. But you're not going to do that on ladder. So on ladder, you're mostly going to be limited to her strong maps. Okay. Okay, nothing too interesting there. Any final things to say? Still think 225 is a little much. I hear you, and you might not like him having 225 health. That one doesn't super bother me, honestly. I think the total power of his kit needed to be adjusted elsewhere, though. What do I think of the concept Mercy should get more ult off damage boost rather than heals? Well, she does. She literally creates ult charge out of nothing by damage boosting. When she damage boosts someone, they get the ult charge for the damage they'd have done. They also get the ult charge for the extra damage that they did because of the damage boost. And then Mercy also gets ult charge for the extra damage that they did because of the damage boost. So she's creating ult charge out of nothing by damage boosting. It's already pretty cool of a concept. So I don't think you could massively rework her to be like, hey, she gets 3 times as much ult charge from damage boosting as she currently does, which is what you'd have to do to have that generate more than heal botting at low level games. So I don't think you can go that direction. Do I do a similar video for tanks and supports? For which ones we should learn to fill a role on a team? Sure. I actually have a scrim that I have to head to, and I can do a separate video. But if we take a quick look at tanks, this is wrong. What they're doing here is you can see they're playing poke tanks. They're mostly playing Sigma and Hog, but that's ladder being ladder. And what's going on here is the ladder just doesn't... Most people don't like to play Orisa. If poke is the meta, you either want to use Orisa or Ball. I'm serious. You do want to use Orisa and Ball. Sigma Hog is not terrible. It's better than I probably rated it in my rating tank pairs video. It's probably is better than I rated it, noticeably so. I'm not proud of that one, but it is not as good as mixing in an actual Orisa, or if you prefer instead to disrupt people to create openings for your hits team to get picks, that sort of thing, a Ball. So yeah. So if I was trying to learn, if you were going, hey, what hero to learn right now? Well, if you're a main tank player, you'd learn Orisa right now. You'd do that, or you'd learn Ball. If you're an off-tank player, you'd learn Sigma, and you'd ignore Roadhog. He's not actually going to be meta. He's not actually going to see a ton of use in pro play. Watch. A few teams will run him, and they'll run him okay in, like, tier 3, maybe tier 2, collegiate, that sort of thing. But he's not going to be heavily seen. Just you watch. And then support, taking a quick look here. Sorry, support, I'm just bringing it up to show you guys. I can tell you what's being run in support right now, and if you were support, if you were a flex DPS player, unsurprisingly, Zen and BAP are good. Zen is good because Zen works with the dive comps that are still seeing quite a bit of run in organized play, as well as a totally viable pick in poke comps. BAP is what you run in poke comps, is also a totally viable, is also what you run in brawl comps. And then you have the last question of, if you're a main support, what do you work on? And your answers there are BAP or Brig. Because what's mostly getting played in organized, there's a bit of everything. There's still some brawl left over on strong brawl maps, but you'd see a bit more. Dive was the more dominant meta. Poke is doing better on ladder right now. Because Poke is doing better on ladder, you're seeing a bit more in organized play as well. That makes sense. And you go, hey, okay, looking at these, those are your heroes to look at. And then Brig becomes your main supportive choice. You can dream that Mercy is going to make it in there, but the reality is if you're in a strong Poke meta, which is where Mercy should do well, you're generally better off greeting Zen BAP or mixing a Brig in there to protect yourself from your counter. But I can do a more full video later. Okay. Or can ask on here, what do you think about having a high school Overwatch team run random roles and tier and quick play matches to learn more about how different players affect fights cooldowns? You could do it as like a drill and exercise for a high school team for them to learn a little bit. I would not make it a regular portion of your practice. And I do have to go because it's scrim time, but that's going to do it. If you guys are enjoying, please drop a like, consider subscribing, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks, Temporal Lab.